Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Satya Vijay, first year MCH resident, IMS BHU. And today's topic is pregnancy outcome in cancer during and after therapy. My moderator is Dr. Manoj Pandey, sir, HOD, IMS BHU. Now, I have divided this topic into few of these subheadings for ESIC. I'll follow this order. It's like incidents, presentation, imaging, staging, followed by systemic treatment during pregnancy, radiation therapy effects, and surgery and anesthesia effects in pregnancy. And it is followed by managing pregnancy diagnosed while undergoing anti-cancer therapy, pregnancy in cancer survivors, and obstetric care and fetal follow-up, neonatal outcomes, fetal placental metastasis, and fertility preservation. And also finally, like dealing the pregnancy outcomes in individual cancers as I've listed below. Coming to incidence, 1 per 1,000 pregnancies are complicated by cancer annually, and 0.07% to 0.1% of all the malignant tumors. Cancer is second most common cause of death for women in reproductive ages. And in the decreasing order of frequency, the following tumors are most common in pregnancy. First by melanoma and breast cancer, followed by cervical cancers, followed by lymphomas and leukemias. Coming to the presentation, there is always a delay in presentation of malignancies in pregnancy. This has been attributed to the presenting symptoms attributing to pregnancy, physiologic and anatomic alterations compromising the physical examination, and tumor markers like beta HCG, alpha fetoprotein, and CA125 are increased during pregnancy. And inability to perform imaging studies or invasive diagnostic procedures can also delay presentation of malignancy in pregnancy. Coming to imaging, the imaging must be aimed to limit the exposure to ionizing radiation. And ultrasound is a preferred imaging for breast, abdomen, and pelvis. Chest X-ray and mammograph with abdominal shielding is safely carried out in pregnancy. MRI without gadolinium can be used in cases where it is inconclusive or there is suspicious of bone or brain metastasis. Gadolinium is known to travel via placenta, so it has been not used in pregnancy. CT scan, bone, and PET scans should be avoided throughout the pregnancy. You can see a table on the left side showing the fetal dose of various imaging modalities. In gestational age is a very important factor in determining the severity of the dosage of imaging. And exposure at 2 to 8 weeks of pregnancy, that is the organogenesis stage, there is a higher chance of major malformation. There is always a correlation between the higher dose of radiation and the severity of malformation. Always, the fetal dose of greater than 0.1 milligrays are always avoided, and fetal dose and imaging with fetal dose than 10 milligrays are constitutive prohibitive. Coming to the surgical treatment during pregnancy, there is always a robust evidence that always safety of surgical procedures in pregnancy, but the risk of maternal death and birth defects are not increased. But risk of miscarriage is slightly elevated, that is 1 to 2%, especially when performed in first trimester. There is always an increased risk in the low birth weight and premature delivery, which is 1.5 to 2 times than the normal. And rate of complication and morbidity is higher in major abdominal and pelvic procedures. Anesthetic drugs always have a good safety record, and there is no proven teratogen in anesthetic drugs. And recommendation oncosurgery can be carried out at recommendation is that oncological procedure can be carried out at any moment during pregnancy and should not be delayed if indicated. Whereas the reconstructive procedures, mainly aesthetic procedures, can be delayed until postpartum. Coming to radiotherapy, typical dose is 40 to 70 grays, which is 10 to the power of 4 to 10 to the power of 5 times the diagnostic methods. Not routinely recommended during pregnancy and always recommended after the childbirth. But radiotherapy is considered before delivery in few conditions like oncological emergencies like spinal cord compression, CNS metastasis, and SVC syndrome, and situations where for pregnancy resolution would compromise the treatment efficacy. Dose to the fetus during radiotherapy depends upon total radiation dose, distance of target lesion and the fetus, leakage from the equipment, scattered radiation in the room, and radiation scattered within the patients. Using the shielding technique, the scattered radiation in room can be decreased. And also by increasing the distance between the target and fetus, radiation scattered within the patient can be decreased. Using these two techniques, like adequate shielding and distance of greater than 30 centimeters from the edge of the field to the fetus, the resulting dose can be kept at a range of 40 to 200 milligrays. And dose greater than 0.2 gray are considered teratogenic. Areas such as head, neck, extremities, and breast could be irradiated with minimal radiation to the fetus. Abdominal and pelvic diseases, irradiation has deleterious effects to fetus, where it can be delayed pregnancy, where it cannot be delayed, pregnancy should be terminated. Coming to the systemic treatment during pregnancy, the following table, I would like to show various systems and changes in the systems during pregnancy, and the pharmacological chemotherapy during pregnancy and its clinical presentation. Coming to the cardiovascular system, there is always an increased cardiac output. So because of this, anthracycline-related cardiomyopathy can occur, which can present as heart failure. And radiation-induced restrictive pericardial disease also can manifest as heart failure. And radiation-induced conduction defects can present as arrhythmias. Coming to pulmonary system, there is an increased tidal volume, and a bleomycin-associated pulmonary fibrosis can be seen as a respiratory failure. There is also decreased expiratory reserve, and radiation pneumonitis. These all can cause fetal growth restriction also. Coming to the hematological changes during pregnancy, there is always an increased plasma volume, hypercoagulability, and decreased oncotic pressure. And marrow suppression, if recent treatment is seen as a long-term effect. Secondary leukemias are also seen due to alkylating agents, which all of these can manifest as anemia, thrombocytopenia, and neutropenia. Also as DVT, and there is also enhanced risk of pulmonary edema. Coming to the renal system, there is always increased GFR. Cisplatin or ifosfamide renal damage can be seen as a long-term treatment effect. And there is all these renal damage can cause increased risk of preeclampsia and worsening maternal renal function. Coming to uterus, there is increased uterine volume. And pubertal radiation damage with fibrosis and poor vascularization and small volumes. All these can cause spontaneous preterm labor and also fetal growth restriction. Most of the anti-neoplasmic agents are found in the breast milk. Breastfeeding is contraindicated. In first trimester, there is a high incidence of major malformations, especially when in 10 to 17% when single agent is used and 25% when combination is used. So the chemotherapy is usually avoided in first trimester. And if chemotherapy is urgently needed, pregnancy should be terminated. In second and third trimester, incidence is in major malformation is 3%, which is similar to that of general population. So the chemotherapy is considered relatively safe in second and third trimesters, but it is always associated with IUGR, stillbirth, and low birth weight. These are the few trials which show that giving chemotherapy in second and third trimesters can give a results which are equal to general population. Coming to a few other recommendations, the chemotherapy is stopped 3 weeks before the expected date of delivery or greater than 35 weeks of pregnancy because the nadir of treatment coincides with the birth date and to reduce the maternal risk of infection and bleeding. Weekly regimens are preferred because of lower hematological toxicity and shorter nadir periods. Dose calculation should follow standard procedures outside pregnancy setting. Coming to the few chemotherapy agents, antimetabolites, they are teratogenic in first trimester. For example, methotrexate can cause skeletal and CNS defects. No anomalies are seen in second and third trimesters. Coming to alkylating agents, they are teratogenic in first trimester, causing renal agencies, ocular abnormalities, cleft palate, and they're acceptably safe in second and third trimesters. Coming to anti-tumor antibiotics, in early pregnancy also, they show a low risk of teratogenicity, probably due to their questionable ability to cross the placenta. Vinca in limited studies, they were tolerated in both early and late pregnancies. Coming to the platinum agents, acceptable risks and normal outcomes have been reported along with cases of IUGR. Coming to endocrine therapy, tamoxifen during pregnancy is contraindicated at any time during the course of pregnancy as it is associated with fetal malformations. Coming to molecular targeted agents and immunotherapy, this is a table showing, for example, trastuzumab during pregnancy is associated with oligohydramnios. So it is not indicated during pregnancy. And also bevacizumab is also associated with possible preeclampsia. So it is also not advised during pregnancy. Coming to ipilimumab and PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors, both of them cause abortion, stillbirth, premature delivery, and higher incidence of infant mortality. Rituximab, a monoclonal anti-CD24 antibody used in pregnancy with a good safety record, but it influenced the fetal immunity for some time, but there is always a spontaneous recovery of neonatal B cell count observed in all the reported cases. And for the time being, utilization of immunotherapy drugs during pregnancy is not recommended. Coming to chemotherapy in various malignancies, in soft tissue sarcomas, single agent doxorubicin is preferred over combination with ifosfamide. Because there is limited safety information on ifosfamide during pregnancy, a toxicity profile, and lack of survival advantage of combination. In germ cell tumors, classically it is treated with either BEP or EP, which is relatively toxic, particularly because of etoposide, which cause high risk of fetal growth restriction, and newborn complications include myelosuppression. That's why a combination of cisplatin and paclitaxel is considered during pregnancy. Coming to lung cancer, antimetabolites like gemcitabine and pemetrexed are avoided in pregnancy. Preferred combination is carboplatin and weekly paclitaxel with acceptable toxicity. Coming to leukemia, in AML, classically daunorubicin and idarubicin are used in combination with cytarabine. But there is a considerable fetal morbidity and mortality possible due to high placental crossing. So cytarabine with doxorubicin is used. In CML, interferon alpha can be used safely even during first trimester. Imatinib is safe only when administered during second and third trimesters. Coming to breast cancers, anthracycline-based regimens are more studied and remain the first choice in breast cancer. There is no particular preference of given one regimen over other, either ACE or FAC or FEC or EC. Hormonal agents like LHRH and tamoxifen are contraindicated during pregnancy. HER2 targeted agents are also contraindicated during pregnancy. In early triple negative breast cancers, anthracycline based chemotherapy should be started in second trimester until delivery. Patient diagnosed in third trimester, chemotherapy will be given up to week 34 and aim to deliver at term. Metastatic and rapidly progressive inflammatory cancer should avoid delay in any of the chemotherapies. These are the ESMO guidelines, which tell me, which once again tell what I have repeated. Like in soft tissue sarcoma in first trimester, it will be observed till second trimester, and in second trimester they will be starting a single agent of doxorubicin. Coming to epithelial ovarian cancers, if it will be observed in till second trimester. If chemotherapy has to be started, it is carboplatin and weekly paclitaxel. Coming to germ cell tumors, it also again cisplatin and paclitaxel. And as I said, in non-small cell lung cancer, carboplatin plus paclitaxel is usually advocated. Even like coming to ALL, in the first trimester, the pregnancy, if ALL is diagnosed in the first trimester, discussion of pregnancy termination has to be done. Or in second trimester, induction therapy with doxorubicin and cytarabine has to be done. In CML, interferon alpha can be started in first trimester. And as I told, imatinib is more safe in second and third trimesters. Coming to supportive medications during pregnancy, bisphosphonates are contraindicated in pregnancy because they reduce calcium to fetus, causing skeletal malformations and low birth weight. They also induce maternal hypocalcemia and affect pituition by diminishing the uterine contraction. Colony stimulating factors are used in human pregnancies with good safety record, but there is an evidence that it can cause placenta. And in animal studies, there is an increased rate of spontaneous abortion and low birth weight, and there is no increase in any malformation. So the recommendation is to administer only in cases of severe neutropenia. Coming to managing pregnancies while undergoing anti-cancer therapy, all the premenopausal women on any form of systemic chemotherapy are advised to use an active contraception. Same applies even for male cancer patients, as the agents are partially excreted in semen and influence the sperm DNA integrity. Advised to continue this type of active contraception up to 3 to 6 months following the last administered dose. If pregnancy occurs while on tamoxifen, it has to be informed that there is an increased risk of fetal malformation secondary to first trimester exposure, and pregnancy termination should be considered. And this same applies to when a patient becomes pregnant while being on chemotherapy. But it is different in monoclonal antibodies, as they do not cross placenta early in gestation. Based on data from HERA trial, patients who get pregnant while on trastuzumab can preserve pregnancy, provided that they have to stop trastuzumab. And recommendation is based on data from a limited number of patients. The same principle even applies to rituximab. Pregnancy in cancer survival patient. This is a table showing pregnancy rates in following cancers. As we can see, it is almost equal to normal population only in thyroid and melanoma. In rest of the malignancy, the pregnancy rates are much lower than that of general population. If you can see, breast cancer has the least pregnancy rate following the cancer treatment. Same, the pregnancy rates are 40% lower in female cancer survivors, and these rates depend on cancer type also. Melanoma or thyroid cancer rates are comparable with that of a general population. Breast cancer has lowest chance of subsequent pregnancy, that is 70% lower than compared to that of general population. This is probably because of gonadotoxic chemotherapy or can be because of prolonged tamoxifen. Neonatal outcomes in men or women with prior history of cancer were highly comparable with that of general population. Coming to obstetric care and fetal output, fetus exposed to chemotherapy in second trimester do not experience any significant long-term complications. These pregnancies are regarded always as high risk and are considered for regular fetal monitoring during gestation. The target full-term delivery is always that greater than 37 weeks should be the target. Early or very early delivery, that is 34 to 37 weeks and less than 34 weeks, is always discouraged. Coming to the fetal placental metastasis. Malignant melanoma is the most frequent reported tumor that metastasis to placenta and also has a high rate of fetal metastasis. That is why whenever there is a diagnosis of cancer in pregnancy, there should always be followed by a macroscopic and microscopic evaluation of placenta and cytological examination of maternal and umbilical cord blood. And neonates have to be examined every 6 months for 2 years, that is, which includes a physical examination, chest radiograph, and liver function test. Coming to neonatal outcomes in a pregnancy, in a series of where 180 pregnancies affected by cancer is followed, the mean gestation age at delivery is 36.2 weeks, and 45% deliveries occurred before 37 weeks, 8% occurred before 32 weeks. Induction was performed in 89.7% for maternal cancer, in 88%, and obstetric indications were 12%. 50% neonates were admitted in NICU with prematurity, which is the most common indication for NICU admission. Rates of major and minor malformation were comparable to that of general population. Coming to fertility preservation, factors that influence the ovarian toxicity are age. Younger the age is the lower the risk of ovarian dysfunction. And with the use of alkylating agent, the ovarian toxicity increases. And total dose of chemotherapy delivered also affects the ovarian toxicity. As we know, pelvic radiotherapy depends on the fields and dosage, cause various levels of ovarian toxicity. Here are a few fertility preservation techniques in men. Sperm cryopreservation is the recommended one. Hormonal therapy is not at all recommended in men. And testicular tissue cryopreservation, reimplantation are all in clinical trials. The sperm has to be collected before the chemotherapy is given, because the quality and sample of sperm can be compromised even after single treatment. Intracytoplasmic sperm injection allows the future use of very limited amount of sperm. Coming to fertilization preservation technique in women, embryo cryopreservation is an established fertility preservation technique. Cryopreservation of unfertilized oocytes is used in women without male partner. And other fertilization preservation techniques are ovarian transposition, conservative gynecological surgeries, ovarian suppression, ovarian tissue cryopreservation, and transplantation, which is in clinical trials. In embryo cryopreservation and cryopreservation of unfertilized oocytes, aromatase inhibitor-based stimulation protocols are well established because of concern in estrogen-sensitive breast and gynecological malignancies, where there is always an increase in estrogen causing recurrence of these malignancies. In ovarian transposition or oophoropexy, it is performed whenever there is a pelvic irradiation is performed as a cancer treatment. Because of the radiation scatter, ovaries are always not protected and they're always not successful. Because risk of reimmigration of ovaries, this procedure has to be performed close to the time of radiation. And coming to conservative gynecological surgeries, it is a radical trachelectomy, which I will deal in subsequent slides, which is performed in stage 1A2 to 1B cervical cancers, and ovarian cystectomy, which can be performed in early stage ovarian cancers. Coming to ovarian suppression, GnRH analogs may offer to the patient with the hope of reducing the likelihood of chemotherapy-induced ovarian insufficiency. Only when the proven fertility preservation techniques like embryo preservation or oocyte preservation are not feasible, And also it can be used in young women with breast cancer. Coming to the individual malignancies, I would like to start with breast cancer. During pregnancies, it is seen in 1 in 3,000 pregnancies. There is always a delay in diagnosis of breast cancer, commonly up to 3 to 7 months. A delay in treatment by 1 month can lead to 0.9% increase in node involvement and 2.6% with 3-month delay. Usually the size of breast cancers are larger, that is 3.5 centimeters versus 2 centimeters in non-pregnant women. And there is always a safety of sentinel lymph node biopsy with low dose of limb scintigraphy with 99 technetium. But blue dye is always not used because of risk of anaphylaxis. This is the NCCN guidelines of breast cancer during pregnancy. As I have previously told, surgery can be performed in any trimester, but in first trimester there is a risk of miscarriage. And in first trimester, it is usually a maxillectomy and axillary staging. In second and third trimester, it can be either mastectomy or BCS with axillary staging, followed by adjuvant treatments. There is always a similar outcome in all these patients when there is spontaneous pregnancy loss, or if the patient chooses to terminate, or when they want to continue the pregnancy. Outcomes in stage 1 and 2 disease are always favorable with a survival rate of 86 to 100%. Presence and number of positive nodes is always prognostic significance. In pregnant women, the 5-year survival rate is 82% if the positive lymph nodes are 3 or less. And the 5-year survival drastically decreases to 27% if greater than 3 nodes are positive. Delay in diagnosis increases the frequency of nodal disease. That is why 53 to 71% of patients have nodal involvement at the time of diagnosis. Subsequent pregnancies does not affect the survival. Patient with node negative disease are advised to wait 2 to 3 years, and it can for subsequent pregnancies, and it can extend up to 5 years for patient with positive nodes. Coming to cervical malignancies, this is the most common gynecological malignancy associated with pregnancy. 1 to 2 per 2,000 to 10,000 pregnancies. There's always a false negative cervical cytology because in pregnancy owing to excess mucus and bleeding from cervical eversion. Stage 1B disease is most common stage found. Survival of patient with cervical cancer is associated with pregnancy is always compromised, but most reports indicate that prognosis is not altered. These are the NCCN guidelines. Like I have already told that up to stage 1B2, a fertility sparing treatment can be done. In stage 1A1, when there is no lymphovascular invasion, a cone biopsy with negative margin is usually preferred. In stage 1A with lymphovascular invasion and stage 1A2, cone biopsy with negative margins or radical trachelectomy with pelvic lymph node dissection are done. In stage 1B1 or B2, a radical trachelectomy with pelvic lymph node dissection is done. But these fertility sparing techniques are validated only if tumors are of less than 2 centimeters in size. In small cell neuroendocrine histology and gastric type of adenocarcinoma, these fertility sparing are not favored. In more than 300 pregnancies currently reported, 10% likelihood of second trimester loss is seen, but 72% of patients carry their gestation to up to 37 weeks. Chemoradiation treatment plan is always used in stage 2B, 3, and 4A. Pregnancy with first trimester pregnancy are usually treated with standard fashion, that is initiation of chemotherapy, external beam radiation. Following this procedure, most of the patient abort spontaneously within 2 to 5 weeks. Following the spontaneous abortion or uterine evacuation, brachytherapy component of radiation therapy has to be proceeded in a standard fashion. In second and third trimester, patients should have a classical high cesarean section before starting a standard chemotherapy and irradiation. Coming to ovarian cancers, it is seen in 1 in 20,000 live births. Majority are early stages and result in favorable outcomes. Germ cell tumors account for most of it, that is 30 to 50%, followed by stromal tumors and epithelial tumors. Majority of epithelial tumors complicating pregnancy are grade 1 or low malignant potential. MRI is essential in determining the potential of malignancy based on size and imaging characteristic features. Virilizing ovarian tumors are secondary to theca luteins, and their management is always conservative. A unilateral salpingo-oophorectomy can be performed in those patients with low malignant potential or stage 1A, particularly if fertility is desired. Evidence of advanced disease may mandate the recommendation of termination if gestation age is earlier, followed by surgical staging and debulking followed by chemotherapy. Postoperative adjuvant therapy should follow the treatment guidelines as of non-pregnant women. If reasonable, low risk, low stage tumors, adjuvant therapy can be delayed until after delivery. Advanced epithelial tumors should receive a combination chemotherapy, as I told previously, platinum agent and the paclitaxel. Coming to endometrial cancers, only 35 cases have been associated with only 35 cases of endometrial cancer associated with pregnancy have been reported in literature. 30% are associated with viable fetus, and more than half of these were diagnosed in first trimester. Abnormal bleeding is the presenting symptom in most of these tumors, and majority of these are stage 1 and grade 1 tumors. Because of this, fertility sparing techniques can be used in like grade 1, or when the MRI showing that the disease is limited only to endometrium, or there is no suspicion of any metastatic lesion, and there is no contraindication for medical therapy. But this is not a standard care of treatment in endometrial cancer, as I highlighted here. They can be started on continuous progesterone-based therapies like megestrol, medroxyprogesterone, or levonorgestrel. And endometrial sampling has to be done every 3 to 6 months. If a complete response is seen by 6 months, conception is encouraged. But if there is endometrial cancer present at 6 months, they have to undergo TH plus BSO. Coming to vulvar and vaginal cancers, typically diagnosed in early stages, surgical management is similar to that of non-pregnant women, but the preference is to perform in second trimester to avoid the fetal risk exposure to anesthesia in first trimester and to decrease maternal risks associated with operating hypervascular vulva in third trimester. Coming to gestational trophoblastic disease, patient with gestational trophoblastic disease are successfully treated with chemotherapy can have a normal reproductive function. In major follow-up study, major and minor congenital anomalies were comparable with that of just normal population. Patients should undergo HCG testing at up to 6th week of postpartum or post-abortion to ensure complete remission. Coming to melanoma, 8% of malignancies, melanoma is like 8% of malignancies diagnosed in gestation. Wide surgical excision with appropriate margin remain the most effective modality. Sentinel lymph node or complete lymph node dissection can be used successfully. Adjuvant chemotherapy is not used because there is no improved survival, and 60 to 70% develop recurrences within 2 years. That's why 2 to 3 years should be awaited for attempting the next pregnancies, especially when there is a nodal disease. Coming to thyroid pregnancy, the diagnosis of thyroid pregnancy termination is not necessary. Primary therapy is a thyroidectomy performed usually during second trimester. Postoperative replacement thyroxine has to be given. Most of the thyroid malignancies are well differentiated and will have an indolent course. Coming to radioactive iodine is sometimes used as a primary or postoperative treatment, is contraindicated both in pregnancy and lactation. This is because radioactive 131 is trapped by the fetal thyroid gland and cause hypothyroidism. And during lactation, breast concentrates the iodide, causing neonatal risk, and also there is an increased risk from significant breast irradiation. To limit this maternal exposure, a delay of 3 months between lactation and thyroid ablation will ensure a complete breast involution. In women with thyroid cancer who received iodine 131, pregnancy should be avoided at least for 6 months to 1 year. Coming to lymphoma, non-Hodgkin lymphoma is more likely to complicate pregnancy because of its aggressive histology and advanced stage disease. CHOP regimen has no effect on pregnancy outcomes, but non-CHOP regimens were associated with several unfavorable outcomes, which includes miscarriage, intrauterine fetal demise, and transient neonatal leukopenia. Rituximab is like it has been evaluated in limited cases with acceptable toxicities, but the further studies are warranted. Coming to Hodgkin lymphoma, ABVD starting at the second trimester, there will be no significant impairment. After the first trimester, therapy should not be delayed, especially in patients who are symptomatic or subdiaphragmatic or progressive Hodgkin lymphoma. Radiotherapy to subdiaphragmatic regions may be performed with abdominal shielding after first trimester. Radiotherapy to supradiaphragmatic regions can be performed with abdominal shielding after first trimester. Most recent series have shown that pregnancy rate among reproductive age Hodgkin lymphoma survivors are similar to that of normal female population. Coming to leukemias, acute leukemias represent 90% of all leukemias that coexist with pregnancy, AML being 60%. Prognosis is always guarded. No evidence suggests that pregnancy adversely affects the prognosis of acute leukemia. Acute leukemia always requires an immediate treatment regardless of gestation age, because delay will result in a poor maternal outcome. Numerous reports have documented that successful pregnancies in patients with acute leukemia after aggressively treated with leukapheresis and combination therapy in second and third trimesters. Mother exposed to cytotoxic drugs within 1 month of delivery, newborn should be monitored for granulocytopenia or thrombocytopenia. CML tends to be always indolent. The chemotherapy regimens used in leukemias have already been discussed in the previous slides. Coming to gastrointestinal cancers during pregnancy, hepatocellular carcinoma during pregnancy has to be resected because of high chance of subcapsular hemorrhage and liver rupture during pregnancy. And if in case there are unresectable hematomas, therapeutic abortion has to be always considered. Colorectal malignancies in pregnancy are mostly rectal and palpable on rectal examination, in contrast to proximal lesions found in non-pregnant women. APR or LAR can be accomplished up to 20 weeks of gestation without disturbing the gravid uterus. These are my following references for making this article. And, thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Very well prepared and very well presented. I think very comprehensively done. Let's take questions now.
Excellent. What is he actually, the speaker?
He is the first year MCH resident.
Excellent.
He is from your state. Am I right?
Pardon?
He is from Hyderabad only, I think.
Yeah, name suggests that it is from.
Yeah, he's from
the surname.
Yeah,
suggests that he's a Telugu. That much I can say.
Yeah.
You have two Telugu states, Manoj Bhai, now. So
yeah, I know you have two Telugu states.
Interesting to understand that about male contraception, especially DNA integrity. That is something that is very important for the youngsters to understand. And I wanted to ask you about the safety of ICG, because you keep talking about radioisotope and blue dye is not allowed. So ICG, would it be safe?
Sir, actually, sir, I haven't checked during pregnancy, but during my PG time, I have done a thesis on sentinel lymph node biopsy. Okay. So during that time, I read that ICG is safe because of less adverse effect compared to blue dyes. But I'm not very sure during pregnancy, sir.
Because I think ICG being used for sentinel is a little more recent, but ICG has always been used for other purposes. So it's not a new agent that is being used. It has been there since 3-4 decades now, is it not?
Yeah.
For fluorescein angiography of the retina, then hepatic perfusion studies, it has been used. I also don't know. I'm just asking. Manoj bhai, any idea?
I have no idea, because most of the breast cancers that you see where you have to do a sentinel, they are recommending technetium-99 to be used.
Okay, must be safe.
Yes. Everybody is recommending technetium-99, even for melanoma and breast where sentinel is being done. So far I have not seen any recommendation that one can go for a ICG. But I think ICG perhaps is safer than the blue dyes. That is for sure. And second thing is that most of the breast cancers that you see which are associated with pregnancy are usually large tumors. And triple negative breast cancers are more common in pregnancy. So axillary clearance might be a good option rather than going for a sentinel node biopsy.
ICG is less allergenic, that much I can, because allergies are very, very uncommon. Anaphylaxis and allergic reactions are practically unseen.
Unheard of.
Although there are reports, but much lesser than the blue dyes.
Yes.
And it is predominantly excreted by the liver. It's not excreted by the kidney. So maybe it is safe.
If it doesn't cross the placental barrier and there are no fetal toxicities, it should be safe.
Yeah, correct.
Dr. Bhaskar has a question. In breast cancer after treatment, when we can safely advise patient to conceive? Vijay, would you reply?
Yes, sir. Sir, it depends upon the ER status. Suppose ER positive patients who are on tamoxifen, at least 5 years they have to wait at least for 5 years.
Exactly.
And but in case if patient wants to conceive, minimum of 2 years is recommended as per the guide. But it has its own high chance of recurrence if they conceive after 2 years.
So can you switch them over to aromatase inhibitors after 2 years and then ask them to conceive? Because letrozole is going to help in conception as well. oocyte production?
I'm not sure, sir. Actually, conversion to letrozole, I'm not sure, sir.
Because pre-treatment letrozole is used for oocyte harvesting.
Yes, sir.
So can it help post-operative, post-treatment, that after 2 years of tamoxifen, switch the patient to aromatase inhibitors like letrozole, and it may even increase the chances of conception?
Yes, sir. Aromatase inhibitors are advocated with less recurrence of malignancy, so probably can be switched, sir.
And then the oocyte versus the embryo,
Yes, sir.
there is something else also that is being said. See, embryo is easier to preserve,
Yes, sir.
less expensive to preserve also. It's much more robust when it comes to its survival.
Yes, sir.
But the problem is, in the West especially, they don't prefer to fertilize and then preserve, because by the time the patient wants to conceive or have a child, she may not continue with the same partner.
Partner.
Oh, yes, sir.
So it becomes a problem. You have lost the oocyte because it's already fertilized. If the lady does not want to have a child with the same partner, it becomes a problem. That's why oocyte is more preferred in the West. It is much easier here because partner swapping is uncommon here.
Yes.
It's a social problem, Manoj bhai. It's a social problem.
True, it's a social problem. Not a problem, it's an issue. Santosh is asking, follow-up patient known thyroid cancer with rising thyroglobulin, conceived, how to manage? So obviously you can't do radioiodine here.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
So what are your options?
Ultrasound of the neck initially, imaging of the neck.
That's the first thing that you're going to do, is the look for the primary site.
Yes, sir.
That is the ultrasound of the neck you can do.
And any suspicions?
And if required, you can also do even a CT scan with shielding.
Okay, sir.
That also you can do, because neck CT can be done by shielding.
Yes, sir.
But the problem is that if the primary is normal and you have to look for the metastatic sites, how are you going to do it? Okay, thyroid is a very indolent disease.
Not sure, sir.
Thyroid is a very indolent disease. You always have two options here. One option is that you advise patient to terminate the pregnancy and go for radioiodine. The other option is that you wait for the completion of the pregnancy, 36 weeks, 37 weeks, deliver the baby, and then go for the radioiodine treatment. Because thyroid is an indolent disease. Suppose a patient is, if diagnosed in first trimester, she may has to wait 36 weeks for making a diagnosis. Even in a metastatic thyroid, even in a metastatic thyroid, 30 weeks is not going to make a difference to the outcome. This is a disease where you talk of 10-year, 20-year survivals. So in the thyroid, if the local recurrence is not there, the second commonest place where the metastasis will be bone.
Okay.
So bone metastasis, usually visceral metastases are very rare from differentiated thyroid cancers. If it is an undifferentiated thyroid cancer, then it is an entirely different issue.
You would not have thyroglobulin elevation there.
You would not have thyroglobulin elevation there.
So I think that's fair. If it is later part of pregnancy, wait for the lady to deliver and then treat.
Yeah.
If it is early, you can give the choice to the patient.
You can give the choice to the patient. So, Bobhai, I had only one patient of breast cancer.
What's your experience? Do we follow up the children? Do we follow up the children? That was interesting, actually. I don't know. I don't do chemotherapy or radiation at all. It's not within my purview. But are we following up the children of patients born of patients who had cancer during their pregnancy? Children are being followed up. Very interesting.
Yes, I think almost all of my patients, whomsoever I have treated, are in very close follow up with me, and most of them had children, and most of their children are doing well. The simultaneous
specifically followed up.
No, not specifically followed up, but like most of them keep in touch. Most of them at least write me once in a year, at least to wish me happy birthday on my birthday. So most of the patients will write either on a Facebook or on a WhatsApp message. because my number has not changed for last 20 years since I first took a mobile phone. I'm continuing
You also
with
didn't
the
change.
number. Huh?
You also didn't change.
Yeah, even my mobile has not changed.
You are the same.
So almost everybody has my mobile number. But if I think of simultaneously having cancer and pregnancy, we have had only one case, I think, uh, rather two cases. One case we had a fungating breast cancer, T4, TNBC, with a second trimester pregnancy, where we gave chemotherapy till the 34 week and then took her for surgery. We did a mastectomy as well as a cesarean section at the same time in the same sitting in the same theater. So that's the only baby that is delivered in a surgical oncology theater till date.
Okay.
So we have one delivery in our operating books.
Okay.
And and the second was a low grade ovarian malignancy, which was actually referred to us from the gynecologist. And in that case, a ovarian cystectomy was done. Patient was followed up and then delivered at the normal time. No chemotherapy was used. So I can encounter only two cases where I had malignancy and pregnancy at the same time. So at the same sitting, we decided that not to risk anesthesia twice. So we gave 2 cycles of chemotherapy, and then at 34 weeks we stopped, waited for 3 weeks, and then proceeded with the surgery and delivered a girl child, as well as the mastectomy MRM was done at the same sitting. Patient is doing well and the baby is doing well.
Excellent.
Both of them are doing well.
Can we give local part heart radiation during pregnancy?
What?
Local part radiation. Someone has a bone met in humerus. So can we radiate that during pregnancy?
If you have a bone mat, you will have to terminate if there is a neural compression with bone mat. If it is a bone mat with no compression, you can wait. You can give chemotherapy. If it's a bone mat with compression and you have to give radiation, then you have to terminate the pregnancy, because spinal radiation is not safe with the pregnancy.
Sir, appendicular radiation, something on arm or feet or something like that, on maybe any of the appendicular bones.
Yeah, you can do with shielding. It is possible that Vijay showed in his slides that it is possible. But the problem is that if it is being given in the first trimester, the teratogenicity may appear. And if you have later stages, then there is a chances of a premature delivery or a low birth weight baby or even spontaneous abortion, which are high. So anytime you want to do it, you have to basically discuss it with the patient. You have to inform her what her options are, and then decide accordingly. Because AC is safe. So in a breast cancer with a metastasis, always considered AC as a safer option than the radiation. So 4 cycle of AC buys you about 12 weeks time. Suman has a question. In cervix cancer, if node positive on imaging, I think we should terminate regardless of gestational age. Subhavai, you want to answer? Node positive cervix on imaging. You see, Suman, this question is actually superlative. The only indication of doing a conservative surgery in cervix is only in up to 1B. Beyond 1B, patient has to be treated with radiation. So the moment radiation is given, termination automatically occurs.
Yes, sir.
So in a cervix, there is no way you can save the baby if the stage of the disease is more than 1B. So if it is node positive, it already become a higher stage, where a conservation or a fertility preservation will not be possible.
If it's late pregnancy, then maybe we can allow the delivery to happen.
Yeah, you can allow the delivery to happen and then operate. But it depends upon it, again, a choice where how much you can wait.
Sir, if one lady come with a large fungating mass, so we'll do the only toilet mastectomy or MRM we can complete.
Why, Ajay, you tell me, logically, what is the difference between toilet mastectomy or doing a full MRM?
Sir, toilet mastectomy is
What is the difference? What is the difference in risk between doing a toilet mastectomy or an MRM? Risk to the child or risk to the mother? Risk of anesthesia remains the same.
Ji, sir, with the same.
So what is the risk?
So basically, we can do MRM, I mean, completely.
You should
We
do
can
MRM.
do.
You
Yes,
should
sir.
do MRM. You are giving anesthesia anyway.
Yes,
So
sir.
when the risk of anesthesia doesn't change, how does the outcome of the procedure going to change? If it is later, if you can wait 12 weeks, you give AC, deliver the baby, and then do MRM. That is also there. But MRM is safe. Surgery is the safest procedure. So surgery is the safest procedure in anesthesia. Anesthesia doesn't carry any risk to the baby.
Correct.
So thank you everybody, and I'll be circulating tomorrow's topic and the link